This video is going to count down the most interesting teams of the 1980s. Now, this doesn't mean the best teams necessarily of the 80s, although there are no bad teams on this list. So what makes a team interesting? Perhaps it's a unique approach, vibrant personalities, controversy, or just flat-out excellence. Usually some combination of all those things. And above all, vibes. Okay, I'm cheating already because this is actually two teams. This is a weird one, and mostly interesting for its weirdness than for the teams themselves. The 1981 Cardinals and Reds were the only teams to ever lead their division in wins, but not make the playoffs. In fact, the Reds had the best record in all of baseball that year, and all they got was this lousy mug. What the hell, I'll buy it. Because of a player's strike, the league decided on a harebrained scheme to split the shortened season into two halves, and the winners of each half would face off against each other to decide who would play in the NLCS. But the Cardinals and Reds both came in second to a different first-place team in each half. The halves weren't even an equal number of games, which just a total shit show all around. In the AL, the system led to a team with a losing record making the playoffs when the Royals won the second half after going 20-30 in the first half, finishing 50-53, the fourth best team in the division. 1981 also has the distinction of being the only year where the Montreal Expos made the postseason, which I guess the baseball gods saw fit to avenge in 1994, but that's a topic for another video. Back to the Reds and Cardinals, there's not really a whole lot that's interesting about these teams other than all this weirdness. Yeah, the Warren Beatty movie is probably the most interesting Reds of 1981. The Reds team was the last hurrah of the Big Red Machine of the 70s before things would fall apart for the rest of the decade. The Cardinals were a pre-Ozzie Smith team in Whitey Herzog's first full year as manager. This must have been a bit of a gut punch for Cardinals fans as the team hadn't been to the postseason since 1968, and now they win the division but miss the playoffs. However, they did have Dane Orge, one of baseball's all-time name guys, so that is some consolation. The 1984 Tigers. These Tigers were one of the most dominant teams of the 80s, and yet they're made up of a number of weirdly underrated players. The two most obvious ones are Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker. Both of these guys have been kept out of Cooperstown for years, and both probably should have been in on the first ballot. Trammell, who had over 70 career WAR, did finally get in 2018, nearly 2 decades after he retired. The reasoning for his snubs was that he was not the best shortstop of his era, consistently overshadowed by shortstop gods Ozzie Smith and Cal Ripken, especially Ripken, who played in the same league and was a very similar type of player. Now, Whitaker boggles the mind even more because he has an even higher career WAR, and he was the best second baseman of the 80s. I'd rank him just barely ahead of Ryan Sandberg. There are 7 second basemen with more career WAR than Lou, and post-integration, the only second basemen with more career WAR are Joe Morgan and Rod Carew. Whitaker's 75 WAR is more than Hall of Famers Sandberg, Roberto Alomar, and Craig Biggio. On this 1984 team, Trammell was the best player, but who's number 2 on the top 12 there after him? Chet Lemon. I was surprised to find out while making this video that Chet Lemon put up 55.7 WAR in his career. I would have guessed that he'd be like a solid 30 WAR type of guy, but Lemon was an excellent defensive center fielder with a great bat, who played 16 years and was consistently excellent for about 12 of them. In '84, Chet WAR'd 6.2, which was good for about 14th in the league, but he didn't get a single MVP vote. I mean, Steve Balboni got 5 votes. Hell, Steve Balboni got more votes than Cal Ripken, who led the league in WAR with 10, and got 1 vote. Hey, look at that. Probably the first time Trammell didn't get overshadowed by Cal. Bonus points for this 1984 Tigers team, you've got 2 all-time name guys, Johnny Grubb and Rusty Kuntz. Yes, Kuntz. The 1980 Royals. This was the first Royals team to ever make the World Series, and there's a lot of cool players on this one, including Willie Wilson, Hal McRae, Frank White, Darrell Porter, Dan Quisenberry, and UL Washington playing shortstop with a toothpick in his mouth. And all-time name guy, Rance Mulliniks. But this team is really all about George Brett. These are Ted Williams type of numbers. George hit for an insane average while also slugging and never striking out. I maintain that this season is the result of a monkey's paw type wish where George said, "I want to bat 390," And he did, but he only did so because a case of hemorrhoids kept him off the field long enough for his average not to regress back down.
Forgive me for asking this, but how are the hemorrhoids this season?
They're fine. How are yours?
Now maybe if he doesn't miss that time, he bats .500 over that stretch and finishes over .400 for the year. But it's more likely to go the other way. And okay, I'm fudging this a bit for the narrative because Brett's 1980 injury that kept him out was actually an ankle ligament tear. But true story now. Brett did have a recurrence of his old hemorrhoid issue in Game 2 of the World Series that forced him to sit, on a donut pillow I assume, in a game which the Royals lost by 2. Now, maybe if you have George's bat in there the whole game, yes, it's possible the Royals win the World Series that year, if not for George's butt stuff.
I'm good twice a year for that. When was the last time you shit your pants? Yeah. Been a while?
The 1984 Cubs. This had to have been the pinnacle of Bleacher bum culture. Before lights had been installed at Wrigley, before the bleachers became as expensive as any other seat in the stadium, a division-winning team after a near 40-year playoff drought, Harry Carey singing from the booth, 81 glorious day-drinking ball games. It must have been a special summer on the north side of Chicago. This team's got Sandberg in an MVP year, Rick Sutcliffe winning the NL Cy Young after a mid-season trade from Cleveland, who you might know is in the American League. That's how good he was after the trade. You've got starter Steve Trout, who I just learned is not actually the father of Mike Trout. Leon Durham was a cool glasses guy. Dennis Eckersley prior to his great becoming as the proto-closer when he was just a pretty darn good starter. The Penguin at third, Lee Smith shutting it down in the ninth, and this guy, who has got to be the most menacing-looking relief pitcher of all time. What's not to like? Other than Mel Hall. That dude sucks. The 1982 Brewers. Anytime a team has a nickname, it ought to go on this list. And the 82 Brewers nickname is one of the all-time, well, let's just say bangers. Yeah, they're called the Harvey's Wallbangers. Okay, this isn't exactly the most self-evident nickname, like the Big Red Machine, for example. It needs a bit of explaining, but it's pretty clever. See, a Harvey Wallbanger is a cocktail that no one has ordered in a bar since 1982, and the Brewers started playing well after manager Harvey Keene took over mid-season. And the Brewers have a lot of heavy hitters, i.e. Wallbangers. This is the first postseason team in Brewers history, and you've got some all-timers like Yount and Molitor, but also power hitters Gorman Thomas, Ben Ogilvie, Cecil Cooper, and Ted Simmons rounding out a phenomenal lineup. You also have Raleigh Fingers closing out games, and fellow all-time mustache guy Pete Vukovich starting. The 1985 Yankees. The Yankees aren't thought about as one of the better teams of the 80s, but they actually have the best overall record throughout the decade, despite only making the playoffs in 80 and the strike-shortened 81 season. The mid-80s Yankees were great teams that might have won a championship or two if there'd been an expanded playoffs back then. The 85 Yankees won 97 games, but finished 2 games behind Toronto. Don Mattingly won the MVP that year with an excellent offensive season. He had a wild 145 RBI, which in those days meant he had to win the MVP, even though this guy existed and was on the same team. Rickey was out of his mind that year in what may be his best season. He hit for average, power, walked, stole bases while rarely being caught, and played excellent center field defense. This team also had its share of controversy, of course, with George Steinbrenner firing Yogi Berra 6 games into the season and replacing him with Billy Martin, who himself had been replaced by Berra after 1983. This was the 4th time Billy was hired by Steinbrenner, and it wouldn't be the last.
Bucky Dent, Billy Martin, Dallas Green, Dick Hauser, Bill Verdon, Billy Martin, Stump Merrill, Billy Martin, Bob Lemon, Billy Martin.
The 1985 Cardinals. The 80s Cardinals kind of had a nickname too. Not really a team nickname, more of a style of play nickname. Whiteyball. Whitey Herzog let this team run wild in the 80s, and especially 1985. This was a unique team compared to today's game, and even compared to other teams at the time. They stole more bases than any team in the live ball era, save for the 1976 A's, which is probably a topic for another video. This team is mostly known for that wild abandon on the base paths, and it certainly was entertaining to watch. Rookie Vince Coleman took the league by storm, stealing 110 bases. But looking back on what we know now about player value, it's hard to see Coleman's season as all that exceptional. Yes, the steals, but he wasn't a very good hitter, didn't walk much, and was just an okay outfielder. But this team didn't really win because of base running. Yes, they were very good, although not as good as the Yankees that year.
And that's entirely because of Rickey Henderson, who put up almost as many base running runs as the entire Cardinals team.
They won because of great hitting by Willie McGee, a career year from Tommy Herr, very good pitching led by an amazing year by John Tudor, and ridiculous defense. They had the greatest defensive shortstop of all time, but he was only the second best fielder on that infield. Terry Pendleton was a beast at third that year. 24 fielding runs versus Ozzy's 20. The left side of that infield was a dead zone for hitters. You also had two center fielders in McGee and Andy Van Slyke roaming the outfield. Also of note is that this team probably suffered the most impactful missed call in baseball history.
Terrell races over to cover, the throw doesn't get him. Right on top of the bag. Well, I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Oh, and remember all-time name guy Dane Orge?
And that's a looper hitting the right field for a base hit.
Ugh, you just don't let a name guy get away from you like that.
We go to a 7.
The 1989 Royals. The 85 Royals were the one that won it all, and they were a cool team too, but this Royals team that finished 7 back of the Bash Brother A's actually won more games and is more intriguing to me. It's quite a difference from that 1980 Royals team led by George Brett, who by the end of the decade had ceded the hot corner to on-base machine Kevin Seitzer, and was a solid hitting first baseman with mediocre power. But this team was all about Bo Jackson. There was something monumental about watching Bo Jackson play baseball. But I do have to admit that Bo Jackson was not actually all that good. Don't get me wrong, he was a good player, but he only put up 2.7 WAR in 1989. He followed that up with a solid 3.5 WAR in 1990, and perhaps he was about to go to another level before his football injury effectively ended his baseball career. Looking at these numbers, I was struck by how bad Bo's defensive numbers were. He had negative 19 career fielding runs. We know about his legendary arm and the throws on a line to home from the warning track, so for his fielding metrics to show up that low with that arm and his incredible speed, he must have been awful reading fly balls. He obviously had top-notch home run power, jacking 32 dingers that year and slugging .495, but Bo did not know the strike zone.
Sorry, had to do a Bo knows thing.
Bo, you don't know diddly.
In 1990, his OBP would tick up, and I do think Bo would have continued to build on this. And who knows, maybe he's a Hall of Famer, or at least has a long career as a Joe Carter, low OBP, big power type. Anyway, back to the 89 Royals. Bo was a solid part of the offense, but this team won because of a ridiculous pitching staff. Brett Saberhagen with a Cy Young season, Mark Gubicza putting up a 6-WAR year, Jeff Montgomery putting together an all-time closer season with 4.6 WAR out of the pen, and rookie Tom Gordon putting up a crazy 17-9 record, pitching primarily out of the bullpen. The 1988 A's. So here's another team with a nickname, kind of, the Bash Brothers, which I guess just describes 2 players and not the whole team, but we'll count it. It was tough to decide between the 88 and 89 version of these A's. The 89 team had Rickey Henderson on it, which is very cool, but everything else was better in 88. And if we're talking about the Bash Brother A's, we gotta go with the most Bash Brotherly season, which is easily 88. Canseco and Big Mac combined for 74 forearm bruising bombs that year. You also had a great year from Dave Henderson, who deserves honorary Bash Brother status. This team is also remarkable because it's when the modern closer was invented. We spoke about Eckersley earlier with the Cubs, a very good starter who became the first real one-inning closer in 88, which transformed him into a first-ballot Hall of Famer. But this becoming was not without its share of torture for A's fans.
You are privy to a great becoming. Look at the screen. Do you see? Do you see? Do you see?
I don't believe what I just saw! I don't believe what I just saw!
The 1986 Mets. The Bad Guys. That's a nickname. You had to have guessed this would be number 1. This team had an animated video made about them, several books written about them.
A hot mess of a baseball team.
While the Bash Brothers were the opening act of the 90s steroids era, the 86 Mets were the headliners of the cocaine era of baseball. I can't imagine we'll ever again see such a rowdy bunch of dudes winning at baseball like the 86 Mets did. This was an incredibly deep and talented roster, but there's something a bit sad about this team because they had the makings of a dynasty that never happened. With a phenomenal core of Doc Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, Lenny Dykstra, Ron Darling, Sid Fernandez, Kevin Mitchell, and Howard Johnson, they seemed poised to dominate the NL East for years to come. But they would stupidly trade Kevin Mitchell for Kevin McReynolds, a solid outfielder for sure, but Mitchell would go on to hit 47 homers in '89 and win the MVP for the Giants. Then they would double down on the bad moves by trading star center fielder Lenny Dykstra to the Phillies for Juan Samuel. Two debilitating trades, two young stars that would both turn into superstars elsewhere. Now, I could see both being bad clubhouse guys. I mean, Kevin Mitchell allegedly decapitated his girlfriend's cat. And where do you even start with Lenny Dykstra? But you have to wonder if the Mets win a couple more if they don't fumble there. Look at the 1990 team, for example. A good second-place team winning 91 and finishing 4 behind the Pirates. This team had Darryl Boston starting in center and McReynolds in left. Those two combined for 5.1 WAR, while that same year, Dykstra and Mitchell combined for a whopping 13 WAR, finishing 9th and 11th in MVP voting. I'm also required to mention that this team had the legendary Keith Hernandez playing first base.
I'm Keith Hernandez.
The all-time leader in game-winning RBI, a record that we can safely say will never be broken. Because they don't keep track of it anymore.